So long story short, Zdeno Chara owes me $200, and I'm calling for it tomorrow. Oh, hey, Bruins are hot again. That's fun. Garden Level Podcast.
This is hockey right here.
Bruins! Whoa! 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 Whoa!
Hey there, Bees fans. It is the Garden Level Podcast on Rogue Media Sports Network. Dan Conlon, myself, Cam Stuart, talking about the red hot, once again, red hot Boston Bruins. Winners of 4 in a row, and yes, sitting pretty in a playoff spot in the Atlantic here on episode 15 of the Garden Level Podcast. We will have Parker McLean of the On the Fly YouTube channel. Man, this kid, and I do say kid, he's a little younger than us, has forgotten more hockey than most of us know. So we're going to pick his brain about this Bruins team, World Juniors final thoughts, maybe some of those 8 draft eligible guys who were stunning everybody in Minnesota and who the Bruins might be able to pick up. So we will get to Parker. We will talk about this Bruins team, but we got to start with 4 wins in a row. All right. Now that that's happened, that's been established, Dan, the next time we do a show, will the Bruins have lost 3 in a row?
That's a good question, because if you look at their history of games, there's actually a tweet that goes over how streaky they've been this year. They started off with 3 wins and they lost 6, and then they went 8-1. 3 and 5. That was actually pretty consistent there. But if you look at that, they are the streakiest team in the NHL. And right now we're going. Like I said, it's gonna be a roller coaster this year, and we are on the right side of the roller coaster right now. We're going up. We're not going down yet. And it's. I'm along for the ride. I'm trying to keep my expectations kind of in the middle, because we saw how last season went. They were kind of like this last year, and then they just fell off the cliff. But it's been great hockey. They realized giving up goals was bad, and they stopped giving up goals the past 2 games, or they mitigated it to only 1. So they stopped giving up goals. They have been staying out of the penalty box very well the past few games, and they're playing their type of hockey. They're getting contributions from everyone. Fraser Mint him has been really good. He's putting up some points now. He's on pace for a little bit under 40 points. So it's good to see him getting going offensively. And then you got guys like Arvidsson who didn't start off that hot, but he's getting 10 shots on goal in 14 minutes of play. He's starting to get some points now too as well. This was the first time I saw someone tweet, do they extend Arvidsson? That's the first time I ever heard anyone bring that up, because he's been a trade candidate for the whole I think since we traded for him in the summer. Everyone said we're going to trade him. So it's been an interesting past 10 days.
It has been. And honestly, I was thinking about this the other day. Like, our job is to talk about this team, big picture, small picture, but it's almost like, man, they're so streaky. Like, do we need to take big picture out? Like, do we need to, the tank and the draft pick? We don't know, man. It's so far away. And there's just, when you think here comes the Bruins top 5 pick, they do this. They win 4 in a row. They score 10 goals on teams. I've never seen the Bruins do that. Seen 9 a couple of times, but they put 10 on the Rangers. They just destroy them. I just don't. And then they win 1-0 the next day. Like, that's the kind of team we're dealing with here. Before we get to Parker and kind of talk some more about this, Dan, it is episode 15. And as we have done with almost all our episodes, we go over, the best Bruin to wear that number. Really only one to pick from. I mean, no one's worn it in like 70 years. Okay. Milt Schmidt is number 15, number retired with the Bruins. Some would say the consummate Bruin, the ultimate Bruin, the only guy in franchise history to lead. Here it is. Here we go. One sec. The only guy in Bruins history to lead them to the Stanley Cup final as a player, as a coach, and as a general manager, put in team captain as well. He's done it all. He won as a player and as a GM, discovered that kid from Perry Sound, made the trade, the great heist for for Busick and Stanfield from the Blackhawks. So, and Wayne Cashman from the Blackhawks. One of the great trades in Bruins history. It really doesn't get much better than Milt Schmidt when it comes to this number. And Dan, I know you're about to chime in because you've got like just this laundry list of Milt Schmidt stories from your time watching the Bees. But
had to narrow it down. Yeah.
How about like things we'll never see? Put this in the category of things we'll never see again. 1 year, his line, which was called the Kraut line, which we can't get away with that anymore. In fact, I don't know if YouTube's even going to allow that. All three were like German Canadian from Kitchener. It was Milt Schmidt, Bobby Bauer, Woody Dumar, 1, 2, and 3 in the NHL in scoring that year, all in the same line. Man, that's what I call production. Won the MVP Hart Trophy in 1951, finished in the top 5 an additional 4 times. Other than that, so we could have won 3, could have won 5 MVPs just as easily. Led the league in scoring once at 52 points in 48 games. That just kind of shows you how different the league was back then. 48 games, 52 points is going to lead the league for you. Named one of the top 100 players in NHL history, lived to be 98 years old, man. Still was going to number retirement ceremonies as recently as, I don't think he made Rick Middleton. So I guess Cam Neely would have been the one before that in the 2000s. So how about that, Dan? How about that for a Bruins career, Bruins life, huh?
It's an interesting one. And I'm not sure if we'd ever see that again, unless you think someone like Chara or Bergeron can become a head coach and then become a GM after that, which is kind of interesting. Sturm just missed that by a year. Obviously, he was on the Bruins until 2010, so he wasn't on that 2011 team. So he couldn't knock off 2 of those. But that is something interesting. You see in a lot of sports too, like what Bill Russell did too. He was a player coach winning championships. So it just goes to show how different it was back then. And obviously didn't get to see that live, but when you go to TD Garden, you see that 15 in the rafters, and tomorrow night we will be seeing another number in those rafters.
Ooh, yeah. Ooh, yeah. So Milt Schmidt was a bit of a power forward, but obviously the guy we're seeing tomorrow night, physical presence in a different way. How about this for breaking news on Garden Level Podcast? Dan Conlon and myself, the 2 hosts of this esteemed program, will be in attendance Thursday night, Bruins Kraken. The game is like totally secondary. We will be there in attendance to see Zdeno Chara have his number 33 put into the rafters. Dan, this is a night for guys like us, sickos of our age, our vintage, who basically, I mean, I think you and I both watched some Bruins before Chara, but really the beginning of our Bruins time is Chara's time as captain as the thing turns around, lifts the Stanley Cup in 2011. Are you gonna get emotional tomorrow night?
I don't think I'll be emotional, but I think I will be very happy. I'll bring you some tissues, but I think when you go to Bruins games now, obviously the 2011 team, seeing that banner at TD Garden, you kind of just remember all the memories that came with it. And obviously we've seen our team lose after that in the Stanley Cup. So I think it makes it even more meaningful after losing some. So being able to have that banner there forever and to see someone that contributed that banner also get his number in the rafters, he'll be the first number in those rafters that contributed to that 2011 team. Certainly won't be the last, but to see the 2011 banner up there with the number 33 now, that'll be something special. Definitely, maybe get a little emotional about that. But that was our childhood there.
I might get emotional, man. Might happen.
And we talked about in earlier podcasts or earlier episodes how meaningful that signing was. Could be the biggest signing, definitely in Bruins history.
And maybe NHL history, yeah.
And maybe NHL history. So it's going to be a great day. The ceremony is, they're letting you in at 5 o'clock and the game's at 8 o'clock. They want everyone to be seated by 6:10. So it's going to be a long one, but you know, after what Chara did for this Bruins organization, it's definitely worth sitting through.
Yeah, so are they I guess they're gonna leave some time for like the normal warm-ups afterwards, I guess, is what they're doing. But I think it's gonna be funny. Like people are going to be drinking during the thing. They're all going to get up to
From
piss
5 to 11.
during the puck drop. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, you'll get pretty lubed up because the game is going to end at 11. So that'll be interesting. Again, the game is secondary, man. I mean, this is going to be one heck of a ceremony, I think. And, we people of our age growing up, Boston sports fans, we did take some people for granted, like Brady, for example, not that we didn't celebrate it and live it up, but like, you're just like, oh yeah, you don't just get gifted the best quarterback ever, or like David Ortiz, you don't just have the most clutch hitter in the history of the sport. Chara was kind of one of those of like, can do everything, man, can do absolutely everything for you from the defense position. And again, one of the most influential Bruins of all time, one of the greatest Bruins of all time. In fact, if you had to do a Bruins Mount Rushmore off the dome, is Zdeno Chara on it?
I would start with Orr and Bork. I would put those two on there, and then I'd put Bergeron on there. That would be kind of my first three, just because they're all timers. And then, yeah, I don't think you could. Obviously, there's arguments for other people that maybe people earlier than I watched, like Milt Schmidt, but I would put Chara on there. My four would be Chara, Bergeron, Orr, and Bork. What about you?
The first one that went through my head was 4 defensemen, by the way. The first one that went through my head. Yes, you have to have Orr and Bork. Those are the 2 best players ever. Schmidt could get a spot for the breadth of it. You know what I mean? Like the length and the breadth, and not just as a player. If that's fair. This is going way back. I'm a history nerd. Like, this is going way back, but like, I think only 2 players in NHL history have won more than 4 or more MVP awards. I might have to double check that with Crosby. But I think the only 2 are Gretzky and Eddie Shore. So and Eddie Shore was the first great superstar for the Bruins. The time he retired, he was widely regarded as the greatest hockey player ever. Now, of course, that was 90 years ago that he retired. That's a tough one to keep off the list, though. Neely, Esposito, 76 goals in one season. And one of the obviously more than just one season. I mean, one of the great Bruins goal scorers ever, and probably the greatest Bruins goal scorer ever in the greatest Bruins era. You got to have Bergeron some consideration. Chara gets a lot of consideration, man. Ooh, that is tough. That is tough, man.
Right off your 4 right now.
Malcolm Subban, Sean Corrali, 2-timer.
Yeah.
John Carter, who's in our intro, Boston guy, if you couldn't tell from the intro. You know what? I'm gonna stick with my 4 defensemen. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go Orr, Bork, Chara, Eddie Shore. 3 of them
off some Bergeron fans.
I know, and I like Bergeron probably like personally more than Chara. But I think Chara is better. This is where we're like stretching. I think Chara's like better at his position all time than Bergeron is at his position all time. And again, that's not really a shade on Bergeron, but like you think of the shutdown defenseman when we were growing up, certainly the early part of us watching hockey, it would have been Lidstrom, Pronger, Chara. Like Chara at his peak is that next guy right there.
What's your thoughts on Scott Stevens and all of his? He would how many suspensions would he have currently if he played?
He and Pronger, bro. Like those guys are psychos. Scott Stevens might have been kicked out of the league at this point. Like just genuinely shunned out of the league. I need to call for the people on this one. Bruins Mount Rushmore. What is it? Let me know in the comments below. Let us know. I mean, that's really tough. Like even like a star-studded team like the Oilers, it's kind of easy, right? Gretzky, Messier, McDavid, someone else, Yari Curry. You know what I mean? Some of the historic franchises, it's like kind of easy. Just throw them. Pittsburgh. All right, it's Crosby, Lemieux, Malkin, and Yager probably. Like it's kind of built in for you. The Bruins, that's really tough. That's really tough.
It's tough for an original six team.
Yeah. The Rangers, it's tough to just get 4 guys that you remember. I think the Leafs as well. But yeah, let's get the people to let us know in the comment section below. Then like the video and subscribe to the channel because you're already here and you love what we're doing here in the Garden Level Pod. And you can find us on Twitter and TikTok as well. All right, Dan. We have a lot more Bruins talk coming up. We've got some World Juniors talk coming up. So it's time to bring in our special guest, if I may. This is Parker McLean from On the Fly, the YouTube channel that is covering pretty much anything you want to know in the sport of hockey. Parker, man, happy that you're here. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to talk a little hockey today.
He's got like a Jonathan Taves look. Do you see that, Dan? He's thinking about it.
I can see it.
There we go. There we go. You can see it. Parker, before we get into like this Bruins team, do you have any thoughts on the Mount Rushmore?
So obviously I grew up in a very different era than you guys, as I am
Clearly,
a kid
way
off the top.
Yeah.
So self-proclaimed.
This child we're bringing on the show. Yeah.
But for me, I mean, that was my era of growing up with the Bruins. It was the Chara, it was Krejci, it was Bergeron, Marchand. So that's probably my Mount Rushmore as far as it goes. But you also go, of course, you have Orr and you got Esposito, you got all the rest of the guys from
Heard of them.
Yeah, a long time ago and a different era.
Yeah. All right. The Parker McLean era, Mount Rushmore.
That'd be a good one. A Mount Rushmore of our generation.
Yeah, like I think that's probably a cleaner way to go. You know what I mean? That's probably because we can give good insight on that too. Yeah. So if that were the case, Chara, Bergeron, Marchand, and honestly, this is my bias showing entirely. I was never a Tuukka hater like so many people were in Boston, but I might put Tim Thomas over him. 2 Vezinas, the best postseason ever by a goalie. What's that? As Dan works out his technical difficulties, we still have Parker McLean on the fly here, the YouTube channel. Parker, let's get to present day. All right, Mount Rushmores are great, but let's get to present day. The Bruins on a heater right now. You had the game against the Rangers over the weekend, 10-2 victory. You get 6 assists from Pasta. You get 4 goals from Marat. You get 3 from Pavel Zacha, both of them in their first career hat tricks. But what kind of gets lost in the fold is you get 2 more goals from Fraser Minten. And we talked a lot about Minten on last week's pod, but I am intrigued by your angle on this, Parker, because you live in Leafs country, all right? You follow prospects quite a bit. You know, IIHF mainly, and then Bruins prospects, and this doesn't quite fit into the mold. But had you heard about Fraser Minten before the Carlo trade? Like, was there buzz around this kid for Leafs fans?
I'll tell you something, that when that trade first came out and you heard the return and you were waiting for it, and then you heard it was Minten, I thought it might have been Cowan, and I didn't think there was any shot that the Bruins would end up getting Minten, because he's kind of always been that star-regarded prospect in the Leafs system. It was him and Easton Cowan for years. And the fact that the Bruins pried 1 plus the pick, I think, was a sign of good things to come. And sure enough, you see the success now, but it doesn't surprise me at all to see him do as well as he's doing here in Boston. And I think it's, once again, only a matter of time before you see him continue that success down the line. And he's doing a pretty good job right now.
And dude, how about this? This is great from our friend, Eamon McLean, friend of the show, Black and Gold Productions. How about this? 4th on the team in goals, 10 assists, a plus 14 for a guy who's playing matchup line minutes for a team that has gone quite up and down this season, and on pace for 36 points over 82. And we've heard so much about like the ceiling of Fraser Minten and that it's low, lower than a guy like Hagens or, even a guy like Cowan, like you were just talking about. I think Leafs fans might have thought that as well. And that, people think Bruins fans are overhyping him a little bit. But if you get a 36-point return and play a full 82 as a 21-year-old for this team that may or may not make the playoffs, that is looking to retool, like you got to see that and be like, that kid is a piece of our future.
100%. And you look at the other options and you think back a few years where that was a guy like Charlie Coyle and all of a sudden he becomes the 1C in Boston. It's only a matter of time in my eyes, at least, before he grows into a bigger role, and especially on this Bruins team. And yes, you look ahead and you have guys like Hagens coming in, you're expecting guys like Zacha to stick around, but to have a guy like Fraser Minten that is going to be able to play those minutes, he can play on the defensive side, he can put together some points. I think it's just that much better. And you're having an embarrassment of riches, and we're still on the first year of this rebuild. So it's a sign of real good things to come, and I expect more success for a guy like Fraser Minten.
Dude, I'm starting to see it. Like, I'm starting to see the vision, Parker. I'm talking James Hagens, Will Zellers, Fraser Minten. You could start to see the building blocks here of that next generation. And look, this was something we didn't even see. Like, we barely started to see it 7 months ago when it was just Hagens, right? Like, Minten, we didn't quite know. We knew he was, like you said, like, highly regarded in the Leaf system, a system that, has been just as productive as the Bruins recently in terms of drafting and developing. But like, I don't know if any of us saw this coming, and you can start to see the building blocks, like, for sure, one after the other. You're hoping that one of them is goaltending, mainly because you've signed your starting goalie to an 8-year sheet. And going after the games on Tuesday, you now roll in back-to-back shutouts for this Bruins team. What's funny is there's been like 3 times ever in Bruins history or since the expansion, I think it was, that they had back-to-back shutouts from 2 different goalies. And 2 of them are Jeremy Swayman and Joonas Korpisalo, which is nuts, really nuts. They're still 17th in the league in goals against per game. They're still 13th in save percentage, but it's looking up. Korpisalo, back-to-back good games. Anyway, Korpisalo can get to like a league average backup goalie and steal the Bruins some games and get into the playoffs, or is this just flash in the pan 2 games of Joonas Korpisalo?
Well, it makes me laugh because you think 2 games ago and people were calling for his head, put him on buyout, trade him away, send picks with it. And all of a sudden he puts together 2 stellar performances and the organization or the fans in the organization are back on board. And so
take a $4 million cap hit. I don't care. Sure.
It's
5.
Well worth it. Of course. It's always well worth it. And I think that's where you kind of look at it and go, that just doesn't make sense. And so do I want to say, oh, this is going to go perfect the rest of the season? Probably not. But there are the pieces that, once again, it's trending towards something that's happening, that's going well, and we'll see if it can continue, because as of this current moment, it's looking pretty good.
Yeah, and like that's something we said before the season was like, you've got to get better goaltending. You've got to get good goaltending. You'll probably need elite goaltending the way this is trending, how up and down it has been the entire season. For right now, you're getting good goaltending. I think Swayman's given you good goaltending all year. That hasn't always led to great performances like night in, night out, but I think you've gotten good goaltending from him the whole season. I think better than last year, which is really saying something for his career worst year. But I do think you are getting good goalie play down the stretch, which now, as you mentioned, like people were calling for his head a couple games ago. Now they're on podcasts talking about how good Korpisalo is and how this is suddenly a good tandem. Which makes me think of this, of the trade deadline, which is closer than we think. It is in March still, but like last year with the Four Nations break, teams were getting business done before then. You're going to see it again with the whole ass Olympic break that we've got coming up next month. Is there anything is there any scenario where you're like, the Bruins should be buying and this is what they should be buying?
No.
Yeah. I honestly, I'm there with you. I am.
Yeah, like you have to remember that coming into the season, this was the rebuilding year, and I don't think you're in a playoff spot at the almost halfway point of the season now. You're not going to magically turn it and say we're a buying team just because we've enjoyed some success. I don't think that's what the Bruins should do. That's not what they need to do. They have the pieces in place, and I don't think it's time for a dumpster fire. I know there was a report today with Rasmus Anderson from Calgary with the low rye and a first-round pick, and even that, it's like, is that worth it now to blow up a little bit of that present to blow up the future for a present, that team that isn't even supposed to be contending for a playoff spot, get alone a cup?
Could you sign Anderson? I know he loves Vegas. We've heard that. He was trying to force his way to Vegas. And this great free agent class has turned out to just be like an okay free agent class in 26. The Bruins will have some money. They won't have a ton. Do you think they would be like, they need another right shot defenseman? Do you think they make a push for someone like Anderson in free agency so that they don't have to trade for him?
It's hard to say, right? And it's obviously early, and I think it also depends on what does this Bruins team look like next year after the trade deadline even goes, because free agency is a completely different animal than at the trade deadline. The trade deadline, you're working team to team. Free agency rolls around, you're working team to player, and you got to convince that player that he's in his relative prime of his career. He's going to want to be playing for a cup or money. The Bruins don't have that much money to spend on a guy like him. So is this team going to be a cup contending team? And I don't know if they'd be that kind of team next year.
And I don't think he could wear number 4. I don't think that'll be made available to him if we can.
Might be a point of contention.
Yeah. It is interesting. Like they will need a big right shot. They'll need the kind of player that Rasmus Anderson is exactly. But to your point, like you can give him cup contention in a couple of years. Like if this goes well, you could be, I don't want to say close, but like you could see the vision. But the money there, I don't know if it's going to be there. Vegas always has money. Florida always has money. The Bruins don't always have money. So that'll be interesting to kind of monitor. I don't know. I'm with you. Like, I don't know what kind of trade you're justifying, like who you're trying to bring in here. You're still in rebuild. Honestly, I know they like to say retool. It is minor rebuild and it's going well. Like to me, I see this team, you see the future assets, you see James Hagens and Will Zellers at the World Juniors, which we'll talk about in a minute. And you see, the draft premium that you've got coming up, draft capital, I should say, in premium spots. Like it's almost like you've got your horses here. You see how far they can take you. And if they can't take you to the playoffs, whatever. If they can, that's probably pretty good for your team to get that under your belt before you start really contending.
Yeah, 100%. And once again, it's about not blowing it up before you get to that point, right? We've seen it a couple times throughout, whether it's with Buffalo, where they seem to do the same thing, where they try and make a big splash, it ends up blowing up in their face, and then they're back to another year of trying to kind of rewrite the ship. And I mean, it's been working this year, I guess, in the last little while, but for the Bruins, they have to find ways to be contenders in the future, because right now their team just isn't good enough. They're not going to be able to contend with the teams in the Atlantic. Yes, there's a mismatch right now where a lot of the teams aren't performing to their standard. I mean, Florida seems to be pitter-pattering around to the best of that they can, and they're in the playoffs. They're not, and it all comes down to that when that first puck gets dropped in the playoffs, Florida's going to be at full strength. Tampa's going to be at full strength. The Red Wings likely will be there as well. The Leafs will be at full strength. Realistically, this Bruins team at their full strength isn't beating those teams in a first-round matchup. So
yeah.
I personally don't see a reason why you go all out this year. You tried it in 23. It's time to rewind, and now we'll see what they can get, what they can do in the future.
Yeah, you're not catching teams on the second night of a back-to-back like you just did in your 2 shutouts in a row. You're not seeing a backup goalie. It's just that's not what's going to happen in the playoffs. I think you're totally shifting gears now because we know that your expertise is in the IIHF, baby, international hockey, which is bursting at the seams once again. We talked a lot of World Juniors over the last couple of weeks. Obviously, we know it's been over. All right. U.S. did not win. Yeah, bummer. Sweden won. Yeah, great for you. I mean, look, when you've got a nation like Canada that just can't figure out how to win these things anymore, you play banter, you wait for your rivals to lose. I get it. Look, I get it.
It's like the only thing we have left. It's the only thing we have left.
It's that the U.S. did not. Well, you follow the Bruins prospects closely, and at this tournament, they had themselves a tournament. What impressed you about the guys? Again, mainly these Americans, because that's how Don Sweeney does it. What impressed you about these Bruins prospects at the World Juniors?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll start with Will Zellers, the guy who wasn't even supposed to be on the team. He wasn't named to the initial roster. Finds his way, has one heck of a pre-tournament camp, finds himself on the roster. They start him on a lower line role, and he works his way up to the top line at the end of the tournament. And it was a near perfect story for the kid. And I think you look at the way that he played all tournament long, it was what I'm very excited about to see in Boston. He played his goal scorer, his ability to score goals, and that's exactly what you were looking for from Zellers at this tournament. And he performed exactly like he should. And the fact that he was left off originally was a bit of a surprise, and especially for a U.S. team that on paper was going to struggle a little bit on the goal scoring side. They had some very good defense or offensive defensemen. I was surprised to see him left off the roster, but still he found his way on. He ended up playing great, led this U.S. team in many ways throughout this tournament, and he put him with James Hagens, and he also a little bit quiet to start, but he found his game towards the end of this tournament. Unfortunately, just came up against a better Finnish team in the quarters, and it's always tough to play the Finns, especially when the U.S. is more of an offensive team. You're playing against a defensive structure, and the Finns, never going to be an easy game for them.
Yeah, and I mean, all roads led to Sweden, which I think was the best team going in, best team going out. Let's talk about Hagens though, because it's been kind of a split opinion. You watched him play last year in the World Juniors. You watched him play this year. Which did you think was better? Were you more impressed by Hagens this time around? Were there parts of his game that you were like, I kind of wish that was better by now?
I think the biggest problem for Hagens at this year's tournament was the expectations coming in. Last year, the expectations weren't as intense. You're looking at guys like Leonard, like Ryan Leonard, like Gabe Perreault. This year, there weren't those guys to kind of shield that burden from him. And coming in, and obviously it was his draft year as well last year, so more scouts, more attention was on him as well. So I think this year's tournament, where you're a drafted guy, you have an expectation to lead this U.S. team, that's really what hurt him early in this tournament, because he played perfectly fine. He got to his point total, which he should be at, but it took him a little bit to get going. And because these tournaments are so short, it's extra attention that goes on him. And I think that in many ways, that's the reason why most people are so split on it, because they didn't watch his tournament last year as close, because it wasn't he was more of a draft prospect. It was, is he going to do well? Is he not? This year he should be the guy leading this team. The first game or so, I wouldn't say he led the team, but towards the end of the tournament, he found his way back. And I think that's the kind of game that Bruins fans can be expecting throughout his time in Boston.
Speaking of his time in Boston, when do you think that starts?
That's a good question.
Especially with this weird year the Bruins are having too, right? Like, it's not like they just suck and you're like, yeah, give them a run of games, let's see, they could be fighting for playoff spots at that point.
The thing that scares me the most about bringing him up is bringing him up too early. And we saw that a little bit with Matt Poitras. He kind of the same run of the mill. He ran to the juniors. They brought him in early. Then they sent him to the juniors. And then from there, he never really found his footing back in Boston. And I think that's where you look at a guy like James Hagens, who is a little bit in a similar role. They're looking at him to be a leader in the franchise. Then he has a weird juniors tournament and the expectations drop a little bit. Now I think it's back to he needs to play his game, stick him back in college, let him develop, let him get bigger, let him get stronger, let him get faster. Then you put him in the AHL, let him work his way up in the AHL, and I think that's when you bring him into Boston. This Bruins team is in no rush to pick up a guy like James Hagens. Once again, it's about expectations. You're not trying to win now, you're trying to win in the future. So let your guys build up, let your guys develop, and then bring them in when the time's right.
You think there's like a fine line, of we hear about with Don Sweeney guys all the time, oh, he's just going to stick him in Providence. He's just going to keep him in Providence. He's going to let him rot down there. And I think what makes the Hagens thing so interesting is, like, yeah, maybe you can argue he's letting Lysell and Merkulov and, I guess Patra, he's still pretty young, rot in Providence. All right, fine. You want to say that? Like, those guys weren't the prospect that Hagens is. Like, Georgi Merkulov is still in the AHL, probably because he's not an NHL player. I think you can argue that for Lysell at this point in his career. Like, has there been enough opportunity? That's the part that's up for debate. But you think there's kind of a fine line there of like how much James Hagens is playing in the AHL versus figuring it out at the NHL level when you've used a top 10 pick on him?
Well, and that's another question, right? And I think that's where you start to, you argue, say a guy like Fraser Minton, where at the start of this year, he was relatively expected to go down to the AHL at some point, but he earned his way and he earned his spot. And I think it's going to be the same thing with James Hagens. I think I'll be a year or two in that development process, but I think you put him in the AHL to start, you give him some opportunities in Boston. If he can't prove himself there, you send him back down and you let him develop his game, continue to develop his game. But I don't think this is a fire drill of a team right now that, needs that number one center that is expected of him. I think you let him develop his game, you put him with some skilled players and see if he can find and develop into that role for this team into the future. Because once again, it's not an immediate thing. And that's one thing Bruins fans have to wrap their heads around is this team has enjoyed a lot of success in the last decade or 2 decades now. They need to realize that it's not going to happen this year. It's not going to happen next year. But, 2, 3, 4 years down the line, that's where there's potential for this Bruins team to be back to being that competitive team as a staple team as well, where they have the prospects that continue to replenish. That's made them so good all these years.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, the channel is On the Fly on YouTube. And if y'all haven't checked this out, man, like Parker goes pretty in depth with all these games, all these prospects, World Juniors. Like, it seems weird to say that is his Christmas because it's just right after Christmas, but that is his Christmas, is the World Junior Tournament. I do want to talk about some of the guys who have not been drafted yet. This is, I think, one of the most intriguing parts about the World Juniors every year are those guys who have not been claimed by a team. Who stood out to you? Could be one guy, could be a couple of guys. Who stood out to you in this tournament from these guys who are in their draft year?
So what I'd say is there was one player to me that stood out above everyone else, and it's not who you expect. It's not Gavin McKenna. It's not Ivar Stenberg. It's Viggo Bjork. And he was hands down, in my eyes at least, the best player at this tournament. He wasn't necessarily that eye-grabbing player that you're so used to seeing at these tournaments. He wasn't that he scored, he did get a lot of points, but he wasn't that point producer that you look at the end of the tournament and say he was the best player. For me, Bjork plays the right way. He plays a very Boston style of game too, which I can enjoy. But he's a smaller type guy. And one of my favorite things that I read, and I can't remember the article where I read it, but it's basically if he was, 6'1", 6'2", he'd be the number one draft pick at this year's draft because he plays hard in corners. He plays very skilled hockey. He's good on the penalty kill. He had a couple shorthanded chances. One of them got called off. And he's the kind of player that you look to in key games to provide that kind of clutch ability. And that's where that's why I think, for at least for me, Vigo Bjork was by far my favorite player at this tournament and hands down the best one.
Ooh, that sounds like a Bruin right there.
Sounds
That
like a Bruin.
sounds like a Bruin, Parker. This is interesting because, you know, I the reason I bring it up is because, you know, with this roller coaster of the Eastern Conference, there's a chance that the Bruins have 2 top 15 picks. They could have 1 pick at, you know, 25. You know, there's probably, they can't have 2 top 5 picks, but, you know, they could be picking in the top 10 with their pick. And then they got that Leafs one, which could go anywhere from 6 to 32. All right, well, it can't be 32 because that means they've won the cup, but and that's impossible. So there's a chance of, you know, 2 pretty good first round picks in here. Do you think, you know, Bjork, you talked about, you know, if he had a few more of these measurables, he'd be even more highly regarded. And that was probably the case with Hagens postseason pre-draft, right? Because he was the number 1 prospect at one point. Do you think there's a chance Bjork is slipping into the teens, even the early 20s, low 20s for the Bruins to nab with one of their picks?
I wouldn't say he's going to fall that far. And I think right now he's projected around top 5, but I could see him falling to 10 because, once again, it depends on what teams are looking for, especially in that kind of 4 to 8 range where those teams are looking for specific pieces, whether it be defensemen, whether it be, you know, centers, which Bjork can play, but I think I see him more as a winger. I just think that there is a potential for him to fall. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but if I'm the Bruins, I wouldn't mind trading down and trying to, even if you trade those 2 picks to trade down for it, that could be something that I could very much get on board with.
Did you get a good look at Chase Reed?
I did. I thought he was good. And I especially when Cole Hudson went down, I thought he kind of stepped into that role that you were hoping he would. I once again, it's a right-hand shot defenseman. You don't come across them very often, but he's a pretty good one at this draft. Yeah. Once again, not my eyes the best player at this tournament, but one that could definitely grow into that role, especially down the line. You know, he's kind of got what you're looking for with the size, with the skill, with the skating. But if you're asking me about the player that I like the most, and I get excited about that part, is I like to look at it like as the tournament, like right now, who's the best one. Bjork for me was that guy. But once again, Reed was pretty good. Verhoff's another one, you know, that right-hand shot defenseman that he has the size as well. Looked a little bit like I don't want to call him a donkey, but a bigger guy, tough moving around. He was able to skate, you know, especially when ice started to sort of stretch itself out, but a little bit tough moving side to side mobility wise, especially when the game got physical. We saw him kind of shy away from it a little bit. That was one of the areas that I thought he'd be kind of step into that role.
Right.
Especially as a bigger guy. That's, you know, he's kind of wasted size at that point. And as time goes on, he'll learn to grow into that role. I have no doubt of that, because at the end of the day, you're bidding on potential, and there's no better team than the Bruins that are going to be able to sort of use that size, especially with the way that their defensemen play. But I do think that they're, especially as a right shot defenseman again, but he's probably going to end up in the top 3 just because of, you know, the defenseman aspect, the right-hand shot, the size, and the skating ability too is pretty good as well.
It's like the catcher in baseball. You know what I mean? Like, you could be the 5th or 6th best player in the draft, but if you're a catcher who can hit, man, you might be going first. Like, that's what right shot defenseman feels like, at least in this day and age, especially at that kind of size. You know, a Verhoff, a Chase Reed, who's still kind of grow. I mean, they're both still growing, but interesting. Yeah, let's look at Olympics here real quick. I'm not even going to put you in the position, because I'll say Canada, of course, has a better roster than the U.S. And I say, of course, you disagree.
Disagree. Strongly disagree.
All right, let's hear it. Bring it, because I'm here for this, man.
What I would say is, even at 4 nations, the U.S. has had the better roster.
I think 4 nations they did.
And I think that it's carried through to this Olympic roster as well. But what I will say is, the U.S. is always going to have a better team on paper because they're designed for offensive ability. And that's their whole being. That's That's their play style of hockey.
Is this going to be like a big like Canadian pride thing? Is that what's coming?
We'll get there. They're gonna score a lot of goals. They're gonna score a lot of goals, and if they don't score, they're gonna get beat. And that's just, they've never been known for their defensive ability. All their defensemen this year are offensive defensemen, exception of a few with Swayman and
a lot of them are banged up. Like Slavin, like McAvoy still wearing the shield. Sorry, go ahead.
Sure, but at the same time, you give them a month, they'll be back, right? And Hellebuck will be back to his normal self. And you look at the goaltending, hands down the better goaltending. For Canada's goaltending, Binnington's likely still going to start for this team, which it hurts to say, but there's no way that John Cooper doesn't go with Binnington, right? He won the 4 Nations.
The gold medal game is not going to be at TD Garden, right?
I thought the ice wasn't working, so we're flying out to Boston for that.
Oh, damn it. That's my worst fear, Parker. That it could happen. That's my worst fear. If you bribe these people enough, I think Canada should look into it. Like, no one would suspect it was them if they move it to Boston. You know what I mean? But they should look into it. The IOC has a price.
Well, that's exactly right. And so anyway, so back kind of the goaltending, I'd say hands down the U.S. has the advantage there. To the defense, I would say the U.S. has the advantage there as well. You even look at the depth on this U.S. team. Adam Fox got snubbed, you could say snubbed off the roster for Seth Jones. I don't even know if that's even a snub at that point. It just kind of shows how deep the U.S. defense core is. And then the Canadian side, there's a few question marks in there, and they kept basically the same set of players from 4 nations. And I don't know whether that's a good sign or a bad sign, but it kind of shows that Canada is going to be a defensive team. And at the end of the day, that's all it comes down to, is the Americans are going to score a lot of goals. The Canadians are going to defend a lot and try and counter off the rush. Yes, they'll score goals against some of the weaker teams, but when they go and play the U.S., they're not going to control the pace of it. They're going to be on their back foot. They're going to be defense first, and then they're going to counter off the rush and off the cycle play. And that's where Canada is going to be successful, is in their top 6, in their bottom 6 forwards. Their top 6 is going to be that kind of offensive punch we saw at 4 Nations. Their bottom 6 is going to be the shutdown pairings that you've become so accustomed to. And for the U.S., top to bottom of their roster, it's mainly scoring guys as well. And I was surprised to see Jason Robertson left off this list. It's kind of the same thing with Connor Bedard, where, for Bedard, he doesn't have a spot on this team because Canada's committed to that defensive structure. For the U.S., where they are an offensive structured team, I was shocked you don't put one of the better goal scorers on that roster, but still it's interesting, right? And there's guys you look at and say, well, where does he even fit on this team? Because there are so many good players. And at the end of the day, I do think that the U.S. has the better roster, to answer your question. But I do also think that Canada is designed to beat the U.S. and Canada's going to win the Olympics.
Oh, what did I expect? What did I expect coming into this? I think that's how most Canadians feel, even the ones that don't watch hockey, right? Canada was built to beat the U.S. And that's what, with no Russia, man, that's what matters. That's what matters. So, all right, Parker, let's find some common ground here. Before we get you out of here, I did want to bring up this interesting tweet and kind of get your thoughts on this. So this is from the Saturday game between the Bruins and the Rangers. Now, this is the U.S., obviously, but peaked at 1.3 million for a matinee game on a Saturday with the NFL playoffs on, like that, or about to be on. Like that's a pretty big deal. And where I really want to go with it is that there was a game a little over a week before, played kind of indoors, kind of outdoors in Miami, called the Winter Classic, that had 976,000 viewers in the U.S. Like, that's not a great number really at all, even though it's not that much down from this number here, a regular season game with no bit attached to it. I want to break this into 2 parts. One, how much does Canada actually care about the Winter Classic when Gary Bettman just refuses to put Canadian teams in it? And B, is there a way to fix this and to not have what the the apathy we've had the last couple of seasons?
I mean, it's certainly part of it. And you look at, obviously, Canadians are diehard fans of hockey, and they'll kind of watch whatever hockey you put in front of them, but especially when it's their team. And I know for myself, I didn't end up watching it. They put it on January 2nd this year, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they put it right on prime time of Canada Slovakia, where I'd much prefer watching Canada actually win a quarterfinal than we'll have to watch the Winter Classic, because it doesn't happen often. It's like
Yeah.
it's a once in a blue moon.
Now.
It's like watching history, because you never know when you're going to see the next one. And so what I'd say is, as much as you want to obviously grow the game, and I think Four Nations was a big part of that, especially in the US. The men's worlds on the IIHF side, to kind of bring it back to the international stuff, grew the game as well, and it really introduced it to a lot of fans. The growth of hockey right now with the heated rivalry show as well, we've seen it a lot on the women's side as well, where even those numbers are increasing drastically with the introduction of the PWHL. And so I think as hockey continues to grow, it's about seizing new markets. And as much as you might lose out on sort of the short term, and once again, to bring back to the short term, long term Bruins discussion, it's the same thing with the NHL. They're trying to, they can sacrifice the short term, but their goal is long term viewership. And between this Winter Classic, where they're introducing it to kind of South side fans with, Florida and New York and the rest of those, not quite South, but, they're trying to show that they're committed to growing the game in areas that might not be introduced that early, and instead are watching football, or instead are, growing up on baseball. And I think that's where they can really start to compete, is if they can find ways to introduce the game to fans. They might see some worsened results immediately, but in the long term, that's where they can really see the success. And I'm expecting this Olympic run to be a perfect representation of that as well.
I think that last part is huge, man. That last part is huge. I think the NHL lost some momentum here in the States after Four Nations through kind of no fault of their own. But I look back on, the last great American run, which was silver medalists in Vancouver in 2010, and what you had in that time frame was a good TV deal, which you have now, a better TV deal back then in the US and NBC, and 2009, 2008, 9, 10, 11, it was Detroit, Pittsburgh, Chicago versus Philadelphia after those two teams faced each other, and then Boston. Like you had it all, and then New York had a great team in 2012. They made the conference finals, and they went to the final in 2014. So you had these big American markets getting into it, on the tail end of this American success, at the international level. And you didn't have that last year. Boston didn't make it. Pittsburgh didn't make it. New York didn't make it. Chicago is dreadful, so you didn't have that. Detroit did not make it. And this year it could be different. Detroit should make it. Boston could make it. Philadelphia is playing better. So hopefully for us in the States, that has a trickle down effect on everyone. I would think. But anyway, Parker, we really appreciate you taking the time today. It's on the fly on YouTube. So what do you do? What do we look out for IAHF wise between, I guess, the World Juniors and the Olympics? Are you just living off of those two for that time frame, or what?
So actually, right now it's the U18 Women's World. So we've been doing our full coverage videos for that. So that's now into the playoff rounds. The US beat they beat yesterday. Anyway, they beat the Finns 14-0. So
of course, I was all over that. Yeah,
it was an ugly. It's been an ugly tournament for the most part. But
we can find the beauty in it through your channel, though.
Oh, it's great. It's I can't get enough of Freebird. That song is starting to haunt me for the rest of it. It's like the
14 times.
It's like the Czech goal song. I can't escape it.
You got to retire it if the men don't win gold, though. I think you got to retire it, and that's probably too harsh because it was the juniors that started it. But I think you gotta find something else if you don't win gold with that.
Well,
personally.
last year, so the funny part about last year is outside of Four Nations because it wasn't an official IIHF tournament, but every
Mhm.
IIHF tournament that they used the goal song Freebird at, they won gold. So if it's good luck, because the Olympics are technically a IIHF event,
Ooh.
it could be time. It could be
Wow,
time.
that is a fantastic point right there. See, that's what we've needed this whole time. We needed someone who was all over the IIHF and knew and knows the US's record with Freebird there. Parker, man, can't thank you enough for the time. You've given us so much time, more than you needed to. Super appreciate it. Thanks for joining, man.
Well, thanks for having me. Anytime.
We'll have Parker again. I promise at some point we'll have Parker again. We'll have Dan again too. I got to shut this down without my man, Dan. R.I.P. Dan's internet. That's really what happened in the middle of this episode. So thank you guys for tuning in. Remember to find us on Twitter, TikTok, and of course on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Find Parker McLean on the fly on YouTube. He'll get you ready for the Olympics. I'll tell you that much. We'll talk about the streaking Bruins team and a little bit of USA. He'll get you ready for everyone at the Olympics. So thank you again, and we will see you guys on the next one for the Garden Level Pod.